Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of The Record Process. I am your host, Casey Cavaliere, and we are so excited to have you back. We have so many incredible episodes already lined up for you. We have guests speaking to every part of the creative process, everything from songwriting, recording, production, and even marketing, which I think is a really cool creative extension of an album's life cycle and the art behind it. We're going to touch on themes like inspiration, collaborations, the environment, the space and time that a record was made, and the day-to-day process that brought it all together. It is the sincere hope of myself and my co-host, Mr. Tom Conran, that bringing you these stories each week will not only provide some interesting entertainment for you, but also potentially give you a timely motivational nudge for whatever creative journey you might be on right now. So settle in and take a second to subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and join our mailing list via the link in the show notes, because I do not want you to miss out on a single second of all the conversations we have planned for you, as well as some amazing giveaways and exclusive offers from our incredible partners this season. So with that, here is episode 1 of The Record Process Season 2. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Record Process. On this week's episode, we welcome Derek Sanders and Brooks Betts from the band Mayday Parade. Mayday Parade is an American rock band from Tallahassee, Florida. They formed in 2005, and since then, the band has spent the last 17 years firmly cementing themselves as a pillar in the pop-punk community. Their career has seen numerous Billboard chart appearances, hundreds of thousands of records sold worldwide, and a laundry list of praise from fans and press alike. So we invited them to walk us through the making of their critically acclaimed self-titled record, which was released on October 4th, 2011 via Fearless Records. In this interview, we discussed the idea of trusting your instincts as a band, their career-long relationship with producers Kenneth and Zack Odom, and how the band's previous experience experimenting with co-writers under the direction of a major label influenced a much different mindset going into the making of this record. But before we get going, I want to take a quick second to shout out our amazing partners that are helping us bring this new season of The Record Process to you. First, I'd like to thank DistroKid, who has graciously offered to sponsor this season of The Record Process. DistroKid is the most affordable service for independent artists to distribute their music to all streaming platforms, and it comes filled with a suite of tools to help you elevate your career. DistroKid not only allows you to spread your music across the streaming ecosystem, and yes, that includes TikTok, but it also helps you share your story with labels via the Upstream tool. You can engage your fan base using its text messaging feature and even create unique lyric videos. Record Process listeners now have a chance to get 30% off the first year of their membership at DistroKid. Just head down to the show notes and sign up using our affiliate link. We can't wait to hear what you've been working on, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at truelevelstudio.com/The Record Process and share your release plans with us for the upcoming year. And now, here's our interview. Derek Sanders and Brooks Betts from Mayday Parade, welcome to The Record Process.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. We really appreciate y'all being here, and we can't wait to dive in to talk about the entire process behind an album that you guys made that has recently, I should say, turned 10 years old. And it is, in fact, the Mayday Parade self-titled album. And you guys are about to ship out on quite a little run, and or depending on when this is airing, may already be in the midst of said run, playing that album all the way through. How's that coming together? How are you guys excited about that? Going well? Relearning all the songs?
Right. Yeah. I'm super excited about it. That's personally, I think it's my favorite record of ours for a lot of reasons. And I'm sure we'll kind of dive into some of that. Because of that, I think that this one's just going to be such an incredible tour, and to do the whole international run, North America, Australia, UK, and Europe, just playing this record every night, is really going to be cool. So definitely excited about it. We're sort of in the process of, gearing up and getting ready for it. I'm sort of like building out a set of, transitions and whatnot, and just kind of preparing for it and running through these songs many times, making sure everything is ready to go. And it's going to be a good time.
Love that.
Amazing. Well, so today we're going to kind of try to travel back in time and get back in the mindset that y'all were in leading up to the making of this and through the making of this record. I'm going to do our best to time travel on that. Set the stage for us and our listeners out there. What was the mindset for you guys in the band going into this record before you did it, especially with the success of the previous two albums? Where things were at. You guys were out there obviously like crushing it. A lot of expectations from fans, definitely waiting for new music, obviously. Where were you guys at coming off the previous release? It
was actually a pretty interesting time for the band. Our second album, Anywhere But Here, I feel like we learned so much from doing that album, and a lot of it was learning what we don't want,
Yeah.
Because, when we did A Lesson in Romantics, our first album, we'd only been a band for a year. When we wrote that album, everything was happening so fast. And then, Jason left the band after we recorded that album. We put it out. We kind of just toured straight for months and months. And then we were picked up by Atlantic Records and did our second album, Anywhere But Here. And that process was insane, of still being this like new young band and not really knowing how to handle all of this. And Atlantic was very, heavy-handed in, expecting us to do what they wanted us to do. And, they're putting all this money into it. And so they kind of have the final say. And we had to give up a lot of our creative freedom and sort of jump through these hoops to make them happy. And by the time we put out our second album, we were kind of like, wait a second, like this is not what we want out of this. This is, we felt like we kind of lost control a little bit there. And that's a process that I think ultimately destroys a lot of bands, and a lot of bands never recover from that. And we kind of I think kind of consciously came back together and said, let's go back to the drawing board. And we started doing this because we love, making music and playing music and just, writing the songs that we want to write. And so that was sort of the idea from the top, was let's go back to, when this first started, we were getting together every day, just jamming, making music. We weren't doing, for Anywhere But Here, our second album, we did a bunch of co-writing where they'd send us off to these dudes who didn't know anything about our band or our music and try and work on these radio songs or whatever. And we're let's go back to what we did for Lesson Romantics, where we just get together, we jam, we write songs and make the music that we want to make and kind of regain control of this band. And I feel like that's what happened. And also, thankfully, Atlantic kind of allowed us to do that, because we approached them and said hey, this isn't really for us, this whole major label thing. Can you guys let us just kind of go do our own thing? And we were in a contract with them. They easily could have said, that's not going to happen, but they were actually cool about it and let us go. So that was, roughly, I guess, kind of the mindset at the beginning of it. Yeah.
Yeah, my God, dude, that is a lot all at once to unpack, but honestly, kind of incredible. The first things first is if we're pulling out, overarching lessons that I think are so important, that you guys learned about yourself as a band. And I know so many of our mutual friends and bands that they've been in projects, learning what you don't want or what your band isn't, as opposed to, what you are, is sometimes just as important. And I think that's huge. I know it's very funny. It's so often very cliche, that the label kind of gets their teeth, sunk into an artist or a band, and that changes the band forever. And while I've seen that work sometimes against all odds and strengthen certain artists, I think it's very rare that it doesn't change them. And I think it almost shows a testament to the strength of y'all as a band to take that crossroads point and say, this is what we need to not only survive as a band, but to thrive and to get back to the authentic nature of what drove the band in the first place, and that kind of passion about, the artistry and diving in. So first of all, I commend you on that. And I mean, I think it also goes a long way to show probably where the record, where the record went from there and how the rest of the process probably unfolded too. But I mean, that alone is so important and so cool. And I think the other thing, having the label in that sense come back to you and allow you and see that and know and realize, hey, you can't try to, fit a band into a mold, whether it be with co-writes or trying to like force them to branch out and grow in a direction that, they might see, but maybe just isn't there. I think that's also a really big part of that too. So that's awesome. Just understanding that and knowing that fact about it. I'm curious, were there any takeaways? Obviously, the co-writing thing is such an odd beast. And I think for especially bands in our world, bands that are very like, let's get in a room, let's play this, let's mine for that really, organic energy out of a song and emotion, that doesn't feel contrived in any way. Were there any experiences from those co-writes that you did that maybe, they didn't necessarily yield, some of the band's like favorite results and might have, caused a lot of friction in ways? Were there anything that you took away and decided, hey, but this is like a really decent, lesson or aspect that you did want to bring with the band into the next record?
There probably were some, and so it was myself and Jake who ended up doing most of the, traveling around and doing the co-writes. And I think Jake probably, took more from it or perhaps enjoyed the experience more. I kind of, to be completely honest, just like hated every bit of doing the co-writes. And I think a lot of it's just like, that's just not really how I operate, and the whole like, just having like a time frame of a day to like this, we have to, a lot of times I like to take my time. If I hit a wall, I don't like to force things, and so I ended up just kind of really struggling through that whole process. And I'm sure there probably are some things that I took from it and learned from it, but just in general, it was mostly just like, I hate this and don't ever want to do this again. But
yeah, no, and fair enough. I mean, especially too, I'm curious then, do you guys from a collaborative standpoint then, because you already, have a number of other collaborators. So you mentioned you and Jake doing some of the co-writes there. What does that process look like in terms of inspiration between the band and, does an idea, where does, I'm sure it probably varies as it always does, but, where does, let's say a typical song off Self-Titled, where were those ideas coming from and how, like, what's the catalyst for some of them? And if there are different instances, what do those tend to look like?
Well, so, things have changed a lot since then, even back for that record. I guess, the majority of the songs on that album, on the self-titled album, were ideas that I guess kind of started with and came up with and then brought to the guys, and we took from there and ran with it. There's also a handful, I think there's like 3 songs on there that Jake kind of had the starting point idea of, and we, took from there. It's since become a much more collaborative thing where everybody kind of contributes, these songs. And these days we, everyone kind of demos out their ideas. And that's one of the things that's interesting about, back, 10 years ago, that we weren't, really making demos of these songs. It was just kind of the old school, acoustic guitar. I'm kind of playing ideas for the guys, and we take it from there. And
right.
And so yeah, for the most part, that was sort of the starting point. At the time, I had gone through, at that point, what was like the worst, breakup, of my life. At that, just a really complicated, really toxic relationship that ended really bad, and that's where all of the songs that I ended up writing on that album were pretty much about that whole situation, and was just sort of going through a lot. And but back then that was pretty much. I'm just kind of sorry from rolling here, but one thing that was really cool. We rented a beach house. This was the first time we had done this. We rented a beach house in Florida at Alligator Point, this beach that's about an hour from Tallahassee. or an hour and a half. And what did we spent? Was it 3 weeks or a month? Do you know what it was, Brooks?
Like a month. Yeah, I think it was about a month. And that kind of became a standard thing after that. Yeah.
Oh,
That was completely different from what we had done before.
Cool writing retreat.
Yeah. Well, it was cool because, at that point we didn't all live in Tallahassee anymore. I forget who, was still there and who was gone yet. But so that was kind of the only way we could, well, I guess we all could have met in Tallahassee, but we wanted to go somewhere where there were no distractions. We could really just focus on, working on this music, and sort of an isolated beach house where we could play music all night long. There was no, limit to, what the time we could be playing. And one, it was really helpful, I think, for putting together these songs, but also just such an incredible experience to just be with your best friends at a beach house in Florida for a month, just kind of like having an amazing time and working through these songs. And right, as Brooks said, that's something we continued to do for a while moving forward.
Love that. Yeah. So like, for example, Derek, on like the songs that you brought, were they like full fleshed out ideas as far as like you acoustic guitar and vocals, or was it like I have this riff right here and then here's the chorus, and like specifically on this record on the self-titled?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of both. There were some songs that were pretty well thought out and had a foundation of verse, pre-chorus, chorus, the whole thing, and with lyrics all the way through. And there were some that were, as you said, much more just kind of like, this is sort of a starting point, and we take it from there and jam it out and just see what happened. But yeah, a little bit of both there, I guess. Yeah,
love that.
Yeah. So Brooks, with the beach house scenario, right? Like, so as a guitar player, at like, on the gear end of things, what did that look like for y'all? Like, what did you bring down there? How did you set up shop? Maybe like kind of paint a picture for us and how you go in there knowing like what you're going to want and need to not only like, how are you guys capturing this stuff, and, or, what was the goal of all of it, on the sonic end of it, other than just all of y'all being there? Or was it just you guys in acoustics, which also is, a very beach house vibe for sure?
Yeah. For that being the first time, I guess I shouldn't even say it was the first time, because most of these have worked out this way, where we end up in the best case scenario in the biggest room. This is the living room in this situation at this house, in a circle, which is it turns out to be pretty garage bandy, right? It's loud, you're on top of the drums and you're trying to compete with amps. And, I honestly, I'm trying to think, like, I don't even know how well we were really hearing like vocals even at that point. I feel like, Derek, you had this a cheap PA, like a one speaker setup or something that had its own amp, but it was pretty low, right? Am I right?
Right, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like it was kind of, like it was kind of going back to basics, which was really cool. I've always found an interest in the recording part of it and demoing. And so like we did more of that on the record before, but then for some reason, I don't really remember getting much except for maybe trying to set up a room mic. I think Jake maybe had, I remember him having like an inbox and trying to record some stuff, but
okay.
We really got away from like even demoing us playing songs on this record, where what's interesting is the record before we did a lot of demoing, and then on this one we did none. And then after that, we got way more into demoing even while we were doing these writing sessions.
Yeah.
Just we could listen back and reference, we could take them back, to our individual rooms and think about things. But yeah, it was loud. We were always worried about neighbors, which I don't think we had any troubles on this trip, if I remember right, with neighbors or anything. And we were doing it in the winter, so like nobody's really at the beach, so you get lucky for that, like time wise.
Dude, yeah. I mean, so I love also, that's why, and this is why I asked Brooks, actually, because having So with Wonder Years, we've like done a similar thing where, and it also, has evolved in over the years with different records, and that's why I was like, I wanted to set the scene for people too, because it's everything from like, I think sometimes you hear, as like a recording fan and production fan, you hear all those stories about like Rick Rubin renting out a mansion, or like, Zeppelin doing, like drums in a stairwell in like a real weird house. And I think sometimes there's great magic to that. But also it's really just about being there and sharing the space and kind of like getting all together at once. And what you said, I kind of love too. And interestingly enough, how it mirrors, this like recalling of just like energy, which is like, I mean, you said like in kind of like a garage band fashion, but you guys were literally just sitting there with amps, maybe like kind of like trying to drown out the vocals in like a very VFW floor show kind of way, and almost like giving you that like, hey, does this just work when we turn it up and just go for it, right? And in kind of an inherent like charm to just looking around and being like, yeah, that transition felt good. That just, there was something on that I can feel it and see us selling that, and that really working live, because you're getting that out of it, and it's not like you guys sitting there with like a huge Pro Tools rig and just being like, all right, well, now that we have this drum groove, let's try and overlay this one guitar part. It's like sometimes it kind of is just like chaos to like sift through and sort through, and everybody's slowly, adjusting and adapting until it finally sinks in like 30 minutes later, and I love that it was that, in some ways kind of that simple too. And I think that shows, and it probably, you guys probably feel this now and have felt this since then, but probably goes to show a long way to how those songs come off live too. I feel like a lot of bands, it's like you try to reverse engineer. It's like, well, we wrote this great song. How do we sell it live? You guys, like taking the other approach where you're like, hey, this just rips in a living room just with amps and a drum set. So of course it's going to rip when it's like perfectly mixed and the arrangements, dialed in. Right. So I think that's a huge, huge factor in probably the way the record came out. Right.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great way of putting it, and it's something that honestly I kind of miss, now, because it is much less like that these days. And nowadays, of course, we do all sort of get these pretty polished demos that are paint a pretty good picture of an idea of a song, and then it's mostly just sort of taking that, and we'll tweak some things and we'll make some adjustments, but it's mostly just kind of taking that and going with it. Versus just kind of organically putting these songs together as a group, and I feel like that has a lot to do with like there's a magic that is kind of hard, is difficult to capture, and I feel like especially as any band, as their career goes further and further, and they've been a band for longer and longer, it's harder to capture some of that magic that was there at the start. And I think that goes a long way into that, is that there's the process is different and changes, but so something to think about moving forward.
Yeah, right. Well, and also, and real quick too, and interestingly enough, just getting the feel of a room and just loud amps and stuff. I have to, because when we first met y'all and first played with y'all, we were all fascinated, Derek, by the fact, as you probably remember, that you actually don't perform with InEars. I don't know if it's probably still a thing you're doing, but we were all just like kind of shell shocked by that fact. But the more we and again, if for anybody that's obviously seen Mayday, it in no way hinders your singing ability, and so it's quite impressive, especially for a lot of other singers that are so reliant on a really nice in-ear mix or perfect wedge mix or whatever. And I think I've come around to understand that it's probably part of just that, you wanting to feel everything in terms of like a balanced energy in the room, in a venue, through the house PA, right? Instead of having everything so like isolated and sterile and perfect, right? That's kind of the way you explained it to us, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. It feels better. Just, hearing it the most, kind of natural, like the most way people are going to be hearing it at the show. Yeah, so actually this last tour I did use one in-ear, but mostly just because now we have like some like audio like cues, like count in for songs. The one thing I hated about not having in-ears was not having click, because sometimes if Jake's not back there tapping and the crowd's clapping or whatever, I start going, oh no, like I start losing,
Right.
But so I did use one ear, but I don't like. Colin, he just threw it together a mix, and I don't tweak a single thing. I just like, as long as I can hear, click and any kind of count ins, that's it. And I like having the other ear out so I can hear, the PA. Yeah, I feel like I don't know. Everybody's different, but for me, it's always been like, yeah, you know how to play the song, you know how to sing the song. Just go up there and just do it, and not nitpick the the mix is a little like I've never like this never. I don't know. I feel like you get that like adrenaline rush, and you're just like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't like bother me, even if it sounds terrible. It's like I still hear it enough to just like do it, and
Yeah.
just feel great about it. But yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I've always loved that and admired that. And especially for that reason, dude. So Brooks, your mix is probably a little different if I know my guitar players than Derek's, just being much more attuned to the precision and the way things sound and blend and isolate. I know I am. But on that sense, and especially then moving into the idea of the sonics of the record, right? Once you had those songs together and fleshed out in the beach house, whether some of them were maybe demoed or just room mics were like very rudimentary, you just knew they worked as an arrangement, right? Then we simply must, if we're talking about Mayday Parade and production, talk about Zack and Ken. For those that don't know, I would love if y'all could give, because you definitely know them better than we do. Kenneth Mounts and Zack Odom, two guys that have done a heavy-handed amount of work in the genre, and specifically with y'all. So how did that relationship come about?
Well, in the beginning, we worked with them because of they did Chroma, right? Was that or am I mistaken on the first record they did with Cartels? Chroma, right?
Yeah, it was Chroma. Yeah.
And so when we were big fans of that, and they're close to us. They're in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to go, and we didn't have anywhere else. Not to say that they were by default, who we went to, but we didn't have our eyes on anybody else super specifically. So when we reached out to them, or the label reached out to them, and they were happy to do the record, we were stoked. We thought that was a great fit. They were right there in Atlanta, wasn't too far away. They're easy guys to work with, and I think they're kind of, they're right, just maybe a little bit older than us, you know what I mean? So like, we're really close in age. It's not like you're working with some older guys who, maybe are less in tune to, the sonics and, like, as you said, like the things that are happening in the scene, especially at the moment, right? Now, I don't want to talk about that record so much, but anyway, we went on and we moved, we went to did the second record with David Bendith. We didn't like that experience, as we spoke about. So
yeah,
in return, you want to go back to something that feels very comfortable. And we did, and it was, it worked out once again to go with these guys. It felt like home. But it was mostly that Cartel Chroma record that we were like, well, of course, why wouldn't we want to work with these guys?
I love that, man.
They're really good with, with going over everything, at least sonically. They really take the time, and we would spend time building guitar, tones. And generally for every record that we've done, at least for my guitars, and I believe a lot of Alex's guitars as well, for amp setups, we kind of run through the record with some similar tones, and just try and keep a consistency about it. But they're also really good with their ideas as far as like maybe structural changes is definitely, and maybe like some chordal changes, just movements in the music to give it a lift or a change. They really spend a lot of time with harmonies, and Zach's really great at coming up with new chord combinations that gives you like that last chorus or that little switch up, that just keeps the listener interested, but without going too far, which is is what we despise so much about, our second record. So we, they're great to work with. They let us be artistic and not overbearing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I mean, honestly, that's a great pitch. I'm sold. I can't wait to bump into them now that I'm down in Atlanta. But yes, having come down to Atlanta, the lore is real of that Chroma album for sure, especially down here. And so that's no surprise. I'm a huge fan. That's an incredible record. And I'm glad that was, if it was the reason for bringing y'all together with them, because I think you've made some incredible records with them as well. Walk me through a little bit more of the process, because this is something Tom and I always talk about, having worked with some bands and obviously on our my own records with Wonder Years stuff. I'm curious what that looked like as a typical like pre-production process, whether that's in the studio, outside of the studio with them, or you mentioned, making some subtle changes and kind of walking through some tweaks and rounding the corners. What does that generally look like with them when you go in with a record? Say this is like, day one, get into Atlanta. What does that look like? One
of the things that we did on this record that also kind of we stuck with and has been kind of a game changer was that they had moved studios since we recorded Less Than Romantics with them. This time around, they were set up at a studio, which is still to this day where they are, called Screaming Eagle Studios. And it's actually in this family's house where kind of the whole downstairs level is the studio and this living quarters. And so we were able to stay and live there at the studio, which is really amazing. To not have to be, like waking up early and driving however far to the studio, spending all day, going back, being tired, sleep, whatever, and you're just kind of sleeping somewhere else at a hotel or wherever, and going back. Actually living there was incredible. And yeah, if I remember correctly, we drove up the night before, kind of settled in. The next day, I remember they showed up with Chick-fil-A breakfast for all of us. It was the first time we had seen them, in a little bit of time, maybe since we had recorded Less Than Romantics or maybe at a show sometime. Yeah, I think that we probably spent about a month and a half on that record. I wonder how long pre-pro was. It was at least, a week and a half or so, something like that. I feel like it's always like, day one is a little bit of like kind of taking it easy a little. We spend a few hours just talking.
Eating your Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Which also, quick side note, Tom, make a note of this. Buy band's trust with chicken on day one. That's a thing. That's a step I think we have missed.
Yeah.
That's really, that's a pro move. Yeah. That's a pro move. I like that.
Yeah. They come in and yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like, like as soon as they walk in the door, it's like they just set the vibe of it's so positive and it's so like, this is going to be so much fun. This is going to be amazing. Like, let's do this. And everybody's just like stoked and so hugging each other. And it's just, nothing but happiness. And, I feel like it's like, a few hours of just sitting and a lot of catching up, but then like, okay, let's get into it a little bit. And, at that point, right, we didn't really have, demos of these songs. So that was one thing that was interesting is that, at whatever point we set up and started actually going, like this is their first time hearing most of this material.
Yeah.
Which, these days, of course, now they've heard the demo, dozens of times before we're at this point, So you get like a true, honest, like first reaction of them listening through these songs for the first time. And of course they have it set up where they can record as we go. So now we're also sort of hearing these songs in a played back, for the first time. And it was really cool, and as Brooke said, they're they do a great job of contributing ideas and having, ideas of things that we can change but not being overbearing. And there's some songs that are pretty straightforward that we don't even really change much at all, and there's some that change a pretty good bit, but it all seems to work pretty well. And yeah, so I feel like it's that first week and a half is diving through pre-pro and making those changes, and then it's just like track and drums, and now you're into tracking mode moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to take a quick break here to give a huge shout out to Sheet Happens Publishing. They're a company that works directly with artists to create accurate and immersive tab books, vinyl, and other merch that allows fans to get one step closer to perfecting the soundtrack to their lives. I recently had the pleasure of putting together a book with them for my band The Wonder Years, and trust me, they are incredibly thorough and dedicated to artist-approved accuracy in all of these books. Every tab book comes with the accompanying guitar profiles, which is very cool, allowing you to jump right into playing along with your favorites. Head over to sheethappenspublishing.com to check out all of their offerings, and be sure to enter the code TRP15 at checkout for 15% off your first purchase. That's sheethappenspublishing.com, promo code TRP15. So go check out their amazing library of books, and happy shredding, my fellow guitarists. So I know the next question Tom's going to have is talk to us about the drum tracking and where that went down. Was that at the same spot? Did you do all the tracking there, or what was the move from PrePro then when you have all of these arrangements kind of sewed up and all the tweaks ready to go?
I believe we did the drum tracking at Tree Sound, right, Derek?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and there was two records that we did that for, well, in this sort of setup when they were in the new house, right? New studio down in this the bottom story of this house, and we would do the drums over in, like, they have a big room at Tree Sound where Tree Sound Studios is where we did A Lesson in Romantics in full. Right?
Okay. So you were familiar with that spot.
Right. And they came up in that studio. So they did a lot of work out of that studio. That's kind of where they really got started. So they have great relationships there. But they have this large room, it's not very, it's not padded, or, you know what I mean? There's nothing too acoustical set up in this room. It's just big and ambient. And so that's where we went back to do the drums. And, it's cool. I mean, you get a lot out of it, in that room. And they also use there's a Studio A too. And I could be mistaken, Derek. Did we do some of that in Studio A as well?
I don't think so. I believe we did it all in the cave room there. Yeah.
I was going to ask the cave, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to remember because we've done that. We've been between these two studios so many times. I confuse them because we've actually done different things on different records with drums. But this one, yeah, I believe is the cave. And it's cool. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really, really hard to know if it makes a huge difference. It's so hard to tell. And especially as time goes on, right? Because technology gets better with what you can do digitally, right? With, room emulations and that sort of thing. When the whole record gets done and mixed, it's really, really hard for me to say if the cave makes a difference or not. Because now we've done drums in their studio at this point too on certain records in a very small space. So it's very funny to if you want to spend the extra money, you could do it, but you can also get a lot of the same in a small space.
Well, that's so cool that you brought up Tree and the cave, because I actually just went over there and chatted with Ashley and a couple of the dudes just to walk through the space. And I think somebody actually did mention, or for some reason that y'all came up, had done drums over there. And I think the cave is very much almost looks like a rehearsal type space. There was at least what I'm remembering from the walkthrough, there's a stage, hung PA. There's a pew kind of things that were I'm straight up obviously aptly named for it. There's rock climbing hooks all over, and I was like, what on earth is this? And they're we call it the cave. And so I'm curious, sonically speaking, sure, it's tough to boil down, especially when you get to the mix phase on everything, who's using what mics or isn't, or supplementing things, right? So I totally see you on that. How do you think just moving to a different studio, because Tree Sound is pretty wild. You mentioned the A room, there's a ton of gear over there, just a ton. The atmosphere alone, I'm wondering, did that play a part in kind of recharging? You guys had been there before for the first record, right? That is what you said. So was that kind of a nice resetting, an interesting welcome home, nice chance to revisit that as part of the process for this record then too?
Well, I'll say there's two things with it. Yes, it's very cool to go back and visit that studio, right? And go through there and you kind of reminisce, because it had been, a good amount of years between the first and the third record, right? So it brings back memories, and it's such a big studio. It's really cool just to explore and see, and that's always a cool thing in general, just to be in like what is a large studio where major records have been cut. But then at the same time, the other side of that coin is that when I'm in a studio like that, I start to just feel, well, especially in the situation we were in where we're paying for it more so, like out of a budget, right? And it wasn't necessarily something we had to pay for. I start just thinking like, oh, we're spending a lot of money here, Whereas when you go to the other studio where you're just kind of hanging out and we know we're going to get these songs done no matter what, right? In the smaller studio, there's a lot less pressure, I just, what I mean? It's not like a money sign, the dollars aren't ticking with the clock, and that's to me, that's a much more relaxing way to do a record.
Do you think that influenced the sound of the record, that specific aspect?
The drums themselves?
Yeah, like being that they were tracked at that larger studio, and then everything else was kind of a bit more relaxed when you brought everything back to this Zack.
Maybe if it wasn't Jake, and just, well, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking like too highly of him, but Jake is like such a beast, and I feel like is able to, but right, I could see that kind of pressure, affecting someone, and feeling like I don't have the time to, like, if I start messing up, like everyone's gonna like feel like get mad at me and we're wasting time here, but he's always been like just really quick to, I feel like, I don't know how long it took, but it was like 2 or 3 days there of tracking for him to knock out the whole album, and I feel like he's just such a beast that I don't think it affected him much, but maybe I'm speaking too highly of him there, but yeah.
It's okay. We can praise our drummers. This is a drummer friendly zone for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, if I'm understanding the timeline correctly, like, y'all went in, you did the month-long writing session, retreat, everything, and then went in for like a week and a half, maybe did some minor changes here and there, but like did a lot of the pre-pro and then went into the studio. For him to crush those songs in 3 days, that's very high. Like, right. You should like speak very highly of Jake. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
And he is. I've seen him do it live. He is, as proclaimed, a beast. You've got a great rock solid guy behind the kit there, and also, yeah, too, especially considering the fact then that you didn't really have, demos to work off of, or, up until pre-pro even, which I know, like, even speaking, our drummer, Kennedy, I mean, he is of the mindset where he will just like listen back obsessively, even to just iPhone demos, to learn parts, shape through stuff, shape fills and stuff. So the fact that all of that was just kind of like upstairs in his mind, and he had to like nail it down cold through pre-pro and then just go in and to nail a whole record in 3 days, that's awesome, especially to like that. So that, I mean, that certainly I would definitely say has a big impact that a different drummer, that's pressure too. And Brooks, what you said, man, is totally realistic in terms of watching the clock. It puts you in a different mindset. And as a drummer, if you're sweating and you start fucking up, dude, like that is pressure. And I've seen, unfortunately, some people crumble under that pressure where it just starts to fold in on itself. So the fact that you have somebody that's like confident and solid in that way and can just keep going and keep the momentum there is crucial to like making the timeline and giving everybody else the timeline on the back end to do what needed to be done to make it come together. So yeah, that's awesome.
Right. Yeah. And he's the one that, during pre-pro, like the main focus is usually on the drums because it is so much of the foundation and it's what they're tracking first. And so they really want to lock in like exactly what he's playing on every single part. And so it is, I can't imagine how I watch them do it and I go, I can't imagine how he remembers all this in his head, like where he's going with all of this, but yeah, it's a lot, but he does a great job.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So drums are done. Brooks, you bring it on home to Zack and Ken's spot. Let us talk about some tone questing, because I've been waiting to to crack some secrets about how they approach stuff and what that kind of looks like from a day-to-day thing. Now, you mentioned for you and Alex, like you try and keep a similar like canon of tones across the songs, and I think that's the first thing I'd love to kind of get into and see how how that works and the pros and cons of that with the flow of those sessions. I mean, I can think of a bit, but I'd love to hear specifically for this record, if you can remember, or just in general working with them, what guitar tracking kind of looks like and feels like.
Yeah. I wish I could tell you exactly what tones were used on this record.
No, that's okay. That we'll keep those will be to the tone gods. Yeah.
I know I can whittle it down to, a handful of combinations or possibilities, I always play with I have this 91 Telly that I've had since I was really young. And I always it's a US standard, but I always thought that it was, kind of like a whatever guitar, probably because I got it when I was 13. But then as I would compare it to playing other things and probably my own bias of playing it for that long, it just feels so good in my hand. But it truly has like a different sound that I've tried to find another Telly that replicates that, and I can't find that. Maybe I need to search harder. But anyway, so I use that. I believe I had to have used that on almost everything. I may have picked up another guitar here and there for my own tone. I always used a 80-30 orange head, right? So that's, I'm sure, is in there. They always use Marshall 800s, or they have one there. They have a Bogner that we would have used, and possibly a Matchless that we were using. And a lot of times we would use them in tandem together. So we'd find a combination that worked really well. I wish I could tell you which combination it would have been. Most likely it was, we used maybe a couple different cabinets. I may have been using a Mesa standard cab at that time, but it's more likely it was just a standard, like a Marshall, what is it, the 1960 or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Right. More likely it was something like that. I know they had a couple others, but that was the go-to. I'm not sure if they were dual miking at the time, but they had to have been. I mean, like even myself recording and that sort of thing, I find it very difficult to get a great guitar sound without getting two mics right on the same take. But what they've been doing more recently, which I think is really interesting, even if they weren't doing it then, is they're taking like a XLR Y split, and they're running the two mics together into one signal. That's kind of interesting because then they can't split it later, right? You're not able to really manipulate the levels of the two. But that's what they end up doing. I guess it's a great way of making yourself commit to a sound, right? Finding it, getting the mic placement correct instead of having to go, later I could shift the volume of them around and get what I want. They just lock it down from the get-go. And that's why it's probably great to get I should say we're getting up to maybe 4 different sounds, right, that we're really sticking with. And then throughout the record, and then we're doing everything from like tonal shifts with pickups and maybe some pedals on the front end. With the rhythm stuff, I'm not doing that as much. Alex definitely is. But I should also say that what makes me and Alex work really well is that he's mostly a Les Paul guy. So you've got the single coil Fender, right, on one side, and then you've got the Les Paul humbuckers going on the other. And that in itself is a great, starting place to kind of get some separation in the studio. And then we try not to, step on this, he's not using the same combinations I'm using, on the sessions, so that we're trying to get different sounds and so you can get some separation in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
yeah.
so
I mean,
cool.
That alone is, setting you up for a really nice wide complementary thing. And I love that you brought up, even if they might not have done it back then on that record, but how just the idea of committing in the studio and throwing some pedals in the chain and printing those sounds down is that, I mean, how much of that were you guys taking DIs back then as well, just for safety, or did you end up finding yourself like mix time, or do you even know if you go back at all, or is it just you're printing effects and committing all the way through?
I want to say that there's I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure they're not doing a DI line. And I could be wrong, and maybe they've changed over the years, but I'm pretty sure we're not going back to reamp anything. You know what I mean? It's all what we're putting down, and yeah, down to pedals ahead of time. We've gotten into where we maybe do some post stuff as we've gone through our records, more so, because that's a lot. You can do so much more now, right? With the digital world, or in the box, tones. But no, they're really good at committing or altering it or changing as we're going, or even to the point that we'll have fun and start turning stuff as we're playing. You know what I mean? To get the effect that we're trying to achieve with something. If we listen back to it and we still don't like where we're going with it, we will just re-record it. We've never gone, well, great, we have a DI, we have a clean line, so we can just reamp that later. It's all, and sometimes we've painstakingly gone back and retracked some things that we didn't like tonally.
Yeah, I love that mindset, and it's a different mindset. I don't think, and Brooks, you probably see this as well. You're in the studio a lot, you like with the band and other bands and stuff. Like records are different, and a lot of the tape guys, I know we work with Steve Evans on a bunch of records. He came from like the fully analog days, and where you just like, if you weren't doing it live and you were still tracking and committing a sound to tape full on, and if you didn't like it, something happened, you just redo it, or you live with it, or that becomes part of the charm. And I think there is a part of that ethos that, that works really well when you're doing a whole album worth of material. That's a lot of guitars, right? Like, so it's just you and Alex, but that doesn't mean that it's just one pass through for a song and you're done, right? So that's like a lot of time and a lot of stuff to do. And having that mentality about not being afraid to turn a knob mid take, right? And not being able to be like, hey, let's swell, this at the end, right? Like you're saying, instead of just being like, well, cool, that's going to be a whole like hour worth of like a page dissertation on a like mix revision of what you'd like to like try to have somebody create in post, whereas like, well, you could have just done it or tried to do it there in the moment. And having time, like you said, because you brought it back there, now if you had done the whole thing at Tree Sound, probably not going to have the time to like get those like, let's try this on this pass type stuff, right? So that's part of the importance of it. Yeah,
right. That's where part of probably my own anxiety comes in, because it's hard to be, not that I on this record had to do that right in the bigger studio. We were doing it where we had lax time, but yeah, that's probably where that starts to creep in, because then when you're in there tracking, and you're like, oh, I could just play this right with the tone as it is now, but you might get halfway through with something and you go, you know what, I'm kind of unsure of this now. Am I wasting a lot of time if I redo this right now? You know what I mean? And like, that's where that idea of like, that time creeping up and costing you, starts to get in my head.
Yeah, of course. Derek, I have a question for you. So like, when it comes to like tracking vocals and tracking like keyboard stuff, what was that process like for this record?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, so I forgot, while we were talking about the Tree Sound stuff, we actually we tracked. They have like an amazing grand piano there, and I think we did the piano in Studio A. Was that right, Brooks? That must have been what it was.
I'm almost certain you did that. Yes.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, we tracked the piano for Stay. Stay is kind of the big piano ballad on the record. There and Studio A on that, I believe it's a Yamaha. So that was really cool. And obviously, earlier on, I think the same time we were tracking drums, we locked in the piano. Doing vocals is interesting because, like, you do pre-pro, you lock in the songs and everything, and it's like, cool, chill for like 3 weeks, and then we'll get into your bit, And so finally, once we got enough of the groundwork laid down, we get into to vocals, and I remember for this album, I was just starting to. I was always so nervous about tracking vocals, especially for A Lesson in Romantics and Anywhere But Here, and for this one as well. But this was and you know, these days, you know, enough time has passed and I'm comfortable with it, and I feel, you know, confident that I can get it done well and everything. But it's always been something where it used to give me a lot of anxiety of like, what if I just can't sing this? And what if like we spend so much time trying to get these takes, you know? And so I was kind of right in the in-between there with this one. The first song that we tracked was No Heroes Allowed, which is the second song on the album. I don't know why I remember that. You know, I think back to a bunch of our albums, and even a lot of the more recent ones, I could not tell you what the first song I tracked was, but I remember it being No Heroes Allowed, and it going really well, and just feeling great about it. Zack in particular is very hands-on. He likes to track the vocals, and is very specific about, like, you know, throwing out, and it's things that I, you know, wouldn't have even thought of, but like, okay, like for this word, can you try and, you know, brighten the vowel sound, or can you, you know, maybe you're holding this one word out a little too long or whatever. And so he likes to get in there and be pretty particular about that kind of stuff. But it was, you know, all in all, a pretty smooth process. I think we probably, once we got into vocals, I think we tracked a song a day. I remember one thing that I was at the time a tiny bit frustrated about, which in the long run I guess didn't really matter, but we had a second room set up, sort of a Studio B situation going on, and Cabbage, our bass player, and Jake, our drummer, were tracking harmonies kind of at the same time in tandem while I was doing leads, and which is cool, and it's a great way to do it. But I remember by the time I kind of got around to doing any harmonies, it was like, well, we're stacked full of harmonies, and I was like, well, there were some things that I maybe kind of heard, but I guess it's just kind of too late now for that. But anyway, again, that doesn't really matter, I suppose. But
oh, of course it does. Well,
yeah.
That honestly, no, I mean, I can totally sympathize and understand how that would be. I've seen scenarios where stuff like that, for the sake of time, probably, again, you're trying to maximize, you know, the output, and you just know, well, we need some stacks, we want some stuff in here, but then you go over and you're just like, all right, I'm ready, I'm feeling good, let me tag it. Oh, cool. There's okay. Feels full. All right. No, and you know, and they probably, I mean, they kill it. They incredible vocalists as well in their own right, and can nail all that stuff, and probably go nuts. But yeah, that's also an interesting thing where I guess nowadays, you know, that kind of might be a pro in the pro category column for like demoing and figuring out vocal arrangements way beforehand, right? That's one of those things that you kind of sacrifice. And I mean, I know this even running around doing Wonder Years records and shit. There are those moments where you're just like, we get to the end, we're done a record, I haven't heard 20-30% of it. I know it's going to be there because they were like demo things or stuff we talked about, but it takes all the way until the end before you hear it all together, and sometimes not even, or you just walk and you're like, oh, that's what's there now. Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds good. I might have tried something different, but this is good too. You know, so yeah, I mean, that's super relevant to the process and how it has to get tracked. Because even if you have a lot of time, that time goes fast in the studio. So no, that's super relevant. And also, I'm sorry, Derek.
Oh, no, it's okay. You know, I'm not bitter about it, but and you know, right. I mean, like I said, I love the album. I think it, you know, I wouldn't change anything about it, but no, that's a great point about that. That is definitely one of the pros about, you know, the demoing process now. And, you know, in fact, for many years, I used to just do these really simple acoustic, even when I did start demoing, I was still just doing a demo of myself and an acoustic guitar, you know, and it took a while before I started actually like building out like a more filled out version of a song with harmonies and drums and everything. But that is one of the things I think about is like, well, if I can, because what used to happen is I'd go, well, I hear all these harmonies and, I'd be excited about it, but then it would get to that point and it's kind of too late for that. So it's like, if I can kind of lock some of that in a little earlier on and get people hearing it so they know, what's sort of expected or just what I'm hearing, then that's definitely one of the pros of that process.
Yeah. I mean, and also, along those same lines, yeah, I mean, you're going to have those opportunities where you're leaving space for the rest of your guys by just bringing the acoustic demo. And there's merit to each, it's like having an idea fully articulated, but also, putting and instilling that trust in your best friends and people who you trust to bring something else that, I mean, I'm sure every record, every song, you see stuff where it's just like in the same way where Brooks, you mentioned from a guitar standpoint, the Les Paul Telly complementary thing, you probably think differently than Alex does on certain things. And there's a nice like supplemental quality to the way the guitar arrangements come together even, I would imagine. And that makes a cohesive record, just like the way that some of those harmony stacks might not be where your ear saw them going, Derek. But I guess it's still clearly the record turned out great. And I know that too. Sometimes I've been either whether it be like outvoted or just came in and I'm like, oh, well, had no idea that was going there, but it's definitely staying and I love it. Would have never in 100 years, if you gave me 1,000 hours, never would have come up with that. Yeah, sometimes you got to leave space and trust the people around you. And that's what I love. And I love hearing how even moments like that kind of, tend to be like what you get is not even what you expected. I mean, on that note and the way things kind of take on a life of their own once you get into the studio and you're putting everything down finally, I'm curious, were there any instances with any of the songs, and I love this because I see this happen at least once a record with Wonder Years stuff, and I always hear the same thing, from everybody else, when I ask this question. So I'm curious, were there any dark horse songs where you started out, Brooks or Derek or anybody else in the band where you're just like, this is going to be like the standout track, right? This is going to be like 100%. This is the first single, or maybe even vice versa. There's one where you're just like, I'm really not sold on this yet, but the rest of the guys are feeling it. And then the progression of like pre-pro to you start tracking, and by the end, something that completely changes your mind, that jumps to the front of the line, for you personally, or maybe something that you had the highest of hopes for and just didn't turn out that way. Were there any standout tracks like that on this record for you guys?
I guess it depends on how you look at it. I guess so. This isn't really an example of that necessarily. There's a song. It's called "Without the Bitter, the Sweet Isn't as Sweet." It's the second to last. I think it's the 11th track on the album, and that's one that just barely made it on there. I guess one thing that I sort of skipped past earlier is with the pre-pro, we also had to figure out which songs. We had probably 20 something songs that we had to whittle down to the 12 that are going to be on the album, and that's like a voting process between us and Zack and Ken to make that list. Originally, that song was not going to be on there, and I really, really just loved that song and felt so strong about it. And I think I was like so bummed out about it that they were like, okay, let's just record 13 songs and we can track that song. And then it ended up being that we liked that one more than one of the other ones, and so it took the place of one of the songs we'd recorded, and then that song actually just, I don't know what happened to it. I don't think it exists anywhere.
Just vanished?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they, have it somewhere, but it was never released as, a B-side or anything. And I haven't heard it since we tracked it, so I couldn't even tell you what it sounds like or anything anymore.
We got to go find that song. I'm going to call Zack and Ken. We got to find them.
The hidden song. We got to find it. I know its working title was Georgia. That's all I remember.
That song was not a bad song. I remember liking it. It was one of those. Yeah, a lot of it was is that the chorus wasn't written until later. So I think we didn't know exactly how that song was going to turn out. And then once the chorus was written, we were like, Okay, well, maybe the other one.
Okay.
I love that. And you didn't know that until the end though. Until that last one was tracked, hey?
But that song is one of, Without the Bit of a Sweet Isn't as Sweet is still to this day one of my favorite Mayday Parade songs, and so I'm really happy that it made it on there. I know that Oh Well, the first song on the album, and I believe was the first single as well. I think that's one that we all felt strong about for a long time, and sort of in my head when I was writing that song, was like, this has got to be the first track on the album, and that's one that really kind of worked out, and is I guess probably the most popular song on the album as well. That's an example of, I guess, it all kind of lining up.
It all came together. Yeah, it all worked out the way you drew it up. No, I mean, also, and I had a hunch too, because that is in the best way such an ambitiously anthemic opener that I'm just like, man, this is like an opener, a closer, and the whole like 3-act play all in one. Like, what a song. And like rightfully so. So that's one I'm sure everybody was, just like through and through, like, okay, it is as good as we thought when you got to the end. That's awesome.
Derek, real fast, I want to like dig in on like, what was that feeling that was like, oh, this needs to be the opener track? Can you like quantify that feeling?
Yeah, well, to begin with, so that's, if I had to, I think I probably spent more time working on that song than any other song I've ever worked on in my life, I would think. I mean, there was, it was one of the first songs I started working on after we recorded Anywhere But Here. It's actually one that I did throw together a quick, rough, just instrumental. This is before I had written lyrics for it and before I'd finished, the full idea of the song. I listened to that instrumental demo of that song, I mean, hundreds of times. It was. I guess back then, I don't know if it was a computer or whatever I had, but on my iTunes, it has your top played music, your top played songs. That was my most played song, was that very early, acoustic instrumental version of Oh Well that I remember we were on a tour and I would just listen to it every day and in my bunk and wherever, and it was, I think, over a year of me working on that song before I'd finally finished it, and just really wanted to get it right with that one. And I don't know, it's really hard to say what it was other than just like feeling like I really think this is, because a lot of times you write stuff and you're like, well, hopefully this is good, but I don't really know, totally. But that was one that I really felt like strong about, like it's a strong song, for our band, and really wanted to get it right, and just took so much time to put it all together and just going through different lyrics and different arrangements and everything, until I felt great about it. But yeah, it's one of the songs that I'm most proud of, I guess I'd say. And also just one thing I love about it is that it's I've told people, like, if there's one, like a great opening Mayday Parade song to listen to, it'd be that one, because it kind of has all these different elements of the band, and starts with the soft kind of ballady, side, the piano and everything, and then, fires in high energy, builds up. I love how it has this, big bridge ending that doesn't go back to the chorus, and it's got these alternate vocal melodies going on, and just so many things that I feel like, are kind of staple Mayday Parade things going on in one song.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, Derek. And I think it's interesting to hear you say that as well, because now at this point, I'm wondering, having, been a band for quite some time and put out a number of records, I think the question starts to turn, sometimes is like, well, what do we do? What do we go? Like, where do we go? Do we try and change? Do we try to pivot? A lot of those decisions that bands and artists grapple with, especially later in their career or as they grow and evolve. And, I love the fact that you see on this record specifically, and in that song specifically, this kind of guiding light that is fundamentally everything that you understand about your band and about Mayday Parade, all wrapped into one. And what an incredible feeling to have achieved that, and achieve that seemingly, so relatively speaking, early in your career, even though, at the time it was right in the middle of it, and you'd already put out a couple of records and had a good deal of success. So what a beautiful way to wrap this up. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, man. I love that about you, and I couldn't agree more about that track and about its place at home on this album. So thank you so much for sharing the journey and the whole process with us.
Of course. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having us. And it's so cool to just, reminisce and think back to, all those years ago. It's crazy that it has been that long. And I'm so excited for next year to get out and play these songs again. It's really going to be, the nostalgia is going to be insane. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you at some point. We'll be coming through Atlanta on that tour. So if you're there, if you guys aren't on the road, then I'm not sure what your schedule is, but yeah.
I think unfortunately we will, and this will also probably be airing right around then. So we are definitely both, if all goes well, out on the high seas right now. Gotcha. On tour. But that is to say, everybody else that is here in Atlanta and in Philly, respectively, with Tom, will definitely see you out there. Yes, and I wish you the best and wish everything up until then incredible success through the holidays and everything. Finally, where do you go from here outside of the record tour? And talk to us a little bit about what else is in store for Mayday Parade fans, because I know y'all have some new music.
That's right, yeah. So we just put out, I guess, just over a week ago, put out a new album. Our 7th album is called What It Means to Fall Apart. Super pumped on it. Obviously, the timing's kind of weird that we put out a new album and then go on this 10-year anniversary tour that's months long of an old album. But we put a lot of thought into is it okay to do that or should we wait? But at this point, it's been 3.5 years between Sunnyland, our 6th album, and this one. So we felt let's just get this out there. We'll get around to touring on it. We're also going to, after we do the full self-titled album, we're going to play a bunch of songs afterwards. So we'll have some new songs in there. And we figured, whatever. There's no rules to this. Let's just do it and get out there and have fun. I'm pumped on the new album. It means a lot to still be here playing music, in 2021 or 2022, if that's when this comes out.
Yes, indeed.
And man, it's just it's an incredible thing, and I'm super grateful for the opportunity. And it means very much.
That's awesome. So look out for it. That new album, if you haven't already listened to it, I'm sure if you're a Mayday Parade fan, you already have. Derek, thank you again so much. And we wish you the best, and we will cross paths very soon, I hope.
Absolutely. Casey and Tom, thank you both. Thanks for having me.
See you, Derek.
So with the start of this new season, we have a huge opportunity to get the show to a lot more listeners and expand the conversations we are able to bring you by hitting the ground with a ton of momentum. But in order to do that, we need your help. You can do this by simply sharing the episode with someone right now. If you're on your phone, just hit the little icon in the bottom right-hand corner and text or email the link to a friend who you think might enjoy it. You can also leave us a review on Apple and now Spotify to tell us what future albums you'd like us to cover. It's important to note that this season is also made possible thanks to Deanna Chapman, our show editing ninja, Zack Gelfin, our executive producer at Lesser Matters and Erudite, Slow TV for the tunes that you're hearing right now and on every episode, Holly Smith for her assistance with the artwork and her wonderfully creative and supportive spirit, and most importantly, anyone who took the time to make the record process a part of their day. We know that time is precious, both in the studio and out, and we are really grateful that you chose to spend this hour with us. So, as a thank you for sticking around and joining us in our 2nd season of the show, we've got a few incredible items we'll be giving away each month, courtesy of our amazing partners. First up this month, Arturia is giving one listener a free copy of their Analog Lab V keyboard anthology. Analog Lab is a plugin that combines thousands of world-class presets, giving you instant access to the most iconic synth and keyboard sounds of all time. I use Analog Lab on almost every production I do, and it's incredibly intuitive and a game changer when it comes to finding the right sound super quick. So all you have to do to enter is just rate the show and leave a comment on either Apple or Spotify, and join our mailing list via the link in the show notes so we can reach out to you when we pick a winner at the end of this month. Simple as that. So have a wonderful week, stay safe, and we will catch you next time on
The Record Process.